I'm in love with someone else, and I want a divorce. I can't keep pretending anymore.
1 year after my husband told me I was unattractive and handed me a divorce, his mistress left him for another man. His business collapsed, his accounts emptied, and his name stopped meaning anything to anyone who mattered. And I was on the cover of Vantage magazine. 62 countries. My face, my name, my eyes. He saw it at an airport newsstand at 6:50 in the morning, on his way to another city to try to salvage what was left of a life he had destroyed all by himself. He froze in front of that rack. He picked up the copy. He read my name 3 times. His hands were shaking. That is where this story ends. Now let me take you back to where it began. My name is Isabella. 7 years. That is how long I was Daniel's wife. 7 years of making his coffee every single morning. His cup first, then mine. A habit so consistent it never broke once. Not an illness, not an argument, not on the mornings when something in the house felt cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. 7 years of ironing his shirts, of praying for a man I loved completely, of sitting beside him in the dark when he came home silent and exhausted, and placing my hand close to his so he knew he was not alone. He was sleeping with his mistress for 2 of those 7 years. Her name was Monica. She had a polished smile and a voice that said, "Yes, sir," with the exact right amount of deference. I met her twice and thought, how professional. What I did not understand was that she was not being professional. She was being patient. I did not know any of that yet on the morning Daniel sat me down on our cream-colored couch. He was dressed for the office. Cufflinks on, shirt pressed, the version of himself he presented to the world. He sat across from me the way a person sits when they have rehearsed what they are about to say enough times that it no longer feels cruel. He said he deserved better. Then he said there was someone else. Monica, his assistant. That he had been seeing her for 2 years and he wanted to be with her. That he wanted a divorce. And then, because everything else had not quite finished the job, he looked directly at me and said, "I cannot continue pretending I am with an unattractive woman." I did not cry in front of him. Not because I was not breaking. I was breaking in ways I would not fully feel until I was outside and alone, and the night air hit my face. But I was not going to sit in front of a man who had already decided everything and let him watch. I nodded once. Then I walked to the bedroom. I pulled out the medium suitcase, the one from our Barcelona honeymoon with the small scratch on the corner from the baggage carousel. I packed the things that were actually mine: clothes, my grandmother's earrings, a photograph of my mother, my university degree, the paper with my name on it, the thing that proved I had been someone before I became his wife. When I came back through the living room, he was on his phone. He did not look up. I walked out the front door, down the path, through the gate, and out onto the street. I was not going to spend one more night under the same roof as a man who had just called me unattractive. Leaving that night was not weakness. It was dignity. The door clicked shut behind me, and I stood on the pavement in the October cold with one suitcase. No money of any significance, nowhere to sleep, and not a single direction that felt like the right one. The house was in his name. It had been since we bought it, because he said it was simpler that way. The accounts were technically joint, but every financial decision for 7 years had been his. He managed them, directed them, moved money between them according to logic he explained to me in confident terms I trusted because he was my husband, and trusting him was what I did. My mother died 3 years into our marriage. She left me a modest inheritance, enough to matter. I brought it into our life together. Daniel invested it, grew it, managed it better than I ever could, he said. I believed him. Every account, empty. Every asset, consolidated. His word, his logic, his name on the paperwork. I had nothing except the suitcase in my hand and the fact that I was still standing. I started walking, not toward anything, just away from that house, away from the life I had built inside it, away from the version of myself who had spent 7 years shrinking quietly so that a man could feel larger. At some point, the crying started. The real kind that turns streetlights into long yellow smears and makes each breath feel like a conscious decision. That is why I did not see the car. It was moving slowly, the way a car moves when the driver is looking for an address, crawling along the edge of the road with its headlights sweeping across the front walls of houses. I stepped sideways at the wrong moment. My foot caught the edge of the curb, my ankle turned, and I went down. Not dramatically, just suddenly. 1 second upright, the next on the cold, wet pavement with the suitcase on its side next to me, and the world momentarily reduced to the sound of my own breathing. The car stopped. A door opened. Footsteps on the pavement. Quick, decisive, coming toward me. "Hey, are you hurt?" A voice, deep, steady. The kind that does not go up in pitch during a crisis because it has learned that panic serves no one. I looked up. He was already crouching beside me. Tall, dark-haired, the hair slightly undone at the edges from the evening. A suit cut well enough that it moved with him instead of around him. He was not observing me from a considerate distance. He was right there, close, entirely focused on whether I was all right. "Can you stand?" he asked. I tried. My ankle disagreed with the plan, and something inside me, some structure that had been holding itself together with nothing but stubbornness for the past several hours, gave way. "I do not know where I am going," I said. It came out before I had decided to say it, the truest sentence I had spoken all day. He was quiet for a moment, not the uncomfortable quiet of a stranger who does not know how to respond. Something steadier than that, the quiet of a person giving weight to what they just heard. "My husband divorced me tonight," I said, because honesty, once started, is difficult to stop mid-sentence. "He took everything, the house, the money, everything. I was just walking." He looked at me. He took off his coat, long dark wool, warm from his body, and placed it around my shoulders. "You are not sleeping on this street tonight," he said. Not a question, not an offer he was waiting to have accepted, a decision already made. He helped me to the car, a driver at the wheel who said nothing and asked nothing. I should have been afraid. Any sensible woman alone at night with a stranger in a moving car should have been afraid. But there is a depth of exhaustion where fear requires more energy than you have left. My instincts had nothing to say except, "This man means no harm." So I went. "I am Adrian," he said, just his first name. No title, no context, just Adrian. I would learn the rest in the days that followed. Adrian Vale, Chief Executive Officer of Vantage magazine, one of the most significant figures in international publishing. The man behind a company whose magazines ran in 62 countries and whose opinion on what was worth covering shaped entire industries. A man who had not stopped moving in 12 years of building something extraordinary from nothing. He had stopped moving tonight to crouch on a wet pavement next to a woman with a suitcase and nowhere to go. He took me to one of the company's guest houses. Clean, warm, quiet, the kind of place maintained for visiting executives and important guests. He spoke to the manager briefly. He turned to me at the door. "Rest," he said. "Sleep. I will be here in the morning." I sat on the edge of the bed in that quiet room and tried to take stock of what remained. The suitcase, the earrings, the degree certificate, my own name, that was the list. That was what 7 years had come to when everything else was stripped away. I did not sleep properly. But at some point in the night, the crying stopped, and in the silence after it, I found something unexpected. Not hope, exactly. Not yet. Something quieter than hope. A kind of blankness that felt, compared to everything that had preceded it, almost like peace. He knocked at 8 in the morning, waited. I opened the door. He looked exactly as composed as the night before, which I would come to understand was simply how Adrian Vale moved through the world. Nothing rattled the surface. Not because nothing affected him, but because he had decided a long time ago that rattled. Surfaces are not useful to anyone. "Come with me," he said. "I want to show you something." We drove through the city in the morning light. Parts of it I had only seen in magazine photographs and supplements. A particular road, a particular tower. The car stopped in front of a building that wore its significance quietly. We went up. He showed me the floor. Morning now, fully alive. People moving with the specific energy of people who love what they do and are already doing it. Screens, studios, edit suites, a long corridor of archive rooms lined with bound publications in deep burgundy, decades of them, floor to ceiling. The visible record of a company that had been building something for a very long time. Vantage magazine. I had held their magazines in my hands without ever thinking about the building behind them. We sat in a room with a wide window over the city. He poured water. He asked me one question. "What did you study, before everything? What were you trained for?" "Photography," I said. "I have a degree in it." He went completely still. Then he smiled. Not the careful, measured version from the previous night. A real one, the kind that arrives without being managed. "So do I," he said. 2 degrees, it turned out. Business, because the world required it. Photography, because he loved it. He had never stopped caring about the second one, even as the first consumed most of his waking life. We talked about it for the better part of an hour, about what a photograph actually does when it works, about the difference between recording a moment and understanding it, about the single decision made in a fraction of a second that separates an image that means nothing from one that changes something in the person who sees it. I talked with a freedom I had not used in years, without editing myself down to a size that felt safer, without monitoring whether what I was saying was too much. He listened the way people listen when they are genuinely interested, which is to say, he did not look at his phone once. When it was 9:30, he said, simply, "I want to offer you a position here, not charity, work, real work. I think you have an eye, and this company is built on people with eyes." I looked at him. "You do not know me," I said. "I know enough," he said. "You prove the rest." He told me to think about it. The guest house was available. I thought about it for 11 seconds after he left the room. I accepted. The divorce with Daniel was concluded within 2 weeks. I signed the papers and never looked back. The first months at Vantage magazine were quiet in the way that real beginnings always are. No special treatment, no acknowledgement of the unusual circumstances of my arrival. I was given a desk, a camera, a schedule, and a team lead who expected results and had no interest in my personal history. The work was the work. Either it was good or it was not. I made it good. I was first in most mornings and last out several nights a week. I went through the archives, I watched the senior photographers, how they moved, what they were looking for, what they deliberately left out of a frame. I asked questions. I made mistakes and corrected them faster than expected, because when you have already lost everything, making a mistake at work is not frightening. It is just information. The work improved quickly. Month 2, a commendation in the weekly staff report. Month 3, I led a solo shoot, and the resulting images ran as the lead spread in 2 separate features. Month 4, a team lead vacancy opened, and I was offered it, to the vocal surprise of people who had been there considerably longer. I accepted. Something else was happening in those same months that I had not anticipated and did not entirely trust at first, because I had spent 7 years in a situation that taught me to be cautious about things that seemed to be getting better. I was changing. Vantage magazine ran an internal personal development program. Health, nutrition, lifestyle, how to inhabit yourself well, how to treat your body as something worth caring for rather than something to apologize for. I enrolled because the company encouraged it, and I had nothing to lose. I stayed because it was working. I started sleeping properly, eating with intention, moving not as punishment but as maintenance, the way you oil a door that has been stuck so long, everyone forgot it could open. My skin cleared. My posture changed. My energy stopped feeling like something I was spending down from a limited reserve. The woman in the mirror began to look familiar. Not the version Daniel had looked at and found wanting. Someone clearer. Someone who had been somewhere difficult and had not been destroyed by it. Someone who looked, in fact, like she might be becoming exactly who she was supposed to be. One Friday morning, I was at my desk when footsteps slowed outside the glass wall of my office. Adrian. He had maintained careful professional distance since my first week, which I respected. He was the chief executive. I was a team lead. Those 2 things had a correct relationship, but he was paused now. He came in. I get weekly performance reports, he said. Your name has topped the chart consistently since your 5th week. I work hard, I said. It is more than hard work, he said. He was looking at me with the same quality of attention he had on the night we met. Not a glance, a real look. You are coming back, he said. He walked out before I could respond. I sat with those 3 words for the rest of the afternoon and into the evening. You are coming back, as though the version of me Daniel had looked at was not the real one. As though the real one had simply been elsewhere for a while and was now, steadily and without fanfare, returning. 2 weeks later, he found me in the archive room, well after everyone else had gone home. He stood in the doorway for a moment before he said anything, which was not like him. Adrian always knew exactly what he was about to say. I have rehearsed several versions of this, he said. None of them survived contact with actually standing here. I turned to face him. I am not going to pretend a distance I do not feel, he said. Since that pavement in October, I have not stopped thinking about you. Not as someone I helped, as someone I want to know, fully, not as my employee, as Isabella. I did not answer right away. I did not trust my voice yet. I am not asking you for anything tonight, he said. I only wanted you to know it before anything else happens between us, so that whatever comes next, you know exactly where I stand. He left before I could find words. I stood alone in that room full of decades of someone else's photographs and thought, I am not imagining this. 3 weeks later, he appeared at my desk. Paris, he said. A major commissioning event next month. Internationally televised, full ceremony. The kind of coverage that becomes part of the company's permanent record. I need the best eye I have on that shoot. He looked at me steadily. Come with me, he said. Let me show you the world. I looked back at him. As staff? I asked. Something shifted in his expression. Deliberate. Considered. As both, he said. Do the work, but come as Isabella. The private jet was ready the following Friday morning. The day before we flew, Celeste came to the Vantage magazine offices to prepare me. Celeste was Adrian's head stylist, the woman who dressed models for the kind of covers that hung on museum walls. She was small, precise, and not interested in small talk. She looked at me for 15 seconds when we met, said, "Good bones. Everything we need is already here," and got to work. 4 hours. What Celeste did was not transformation in the theatrical sense. Nobody produced a stranger. What she did, with extraordinary skill, was reveal. She worked with what was already present. She understood that the job was not to build something new on top of this woman, but to clear away what years of being told she was insufficient had layered over the actual surface of her. When she finished, I stood in front of the full-length mirror in the dressing suite. Champagne silk dress. Hair down with a weight and ease I had not known my hair could carry. Skin luminous in a way that had been there all along and simply needed permission to show. My grandmother's earrings catching the light. I stood there for a long time. Daniel had sat across from me on a cream-colored couch and said the word unattractive with the calm confidence of a man stating a fact. Standing in front of that mirror, I understood something I had not been able to see when I was inside the pain of it. He had not seen me. He had looked at me for 7 years and failed to see me. That was not a judgment on my worth. That was a failure of his perception, and it had nothing to do with me at all. I lifted my chin. The jet took off at 8. Paris arrived the way Paris arrives for someone experiencing it properly for the first time, like a place that has been doing this a very long time and knows exactly what it is doing. The light over the rooftops was a blue that felt almost constructed. The air through the car window smelled of coffee and old stone. Even the bridges looked like they were making a particular effort. The commissioning venue was a converted gallery in the 7th arrondissement. Ceilings that commanded attention. Lighting designed by someone who understood what the right light does to the way a space feels. Hundreds of people, exactly the category of gathering that Vantage magazine existed to document. I went straight to work. I moved through that space for 8 hours. I did not sit down. I ate something standing up at the catering table without tasting it. I was entirely, joyfully inside the work, the kind of absorbed focus that used to come naturally before 7 years of someone else's life slowly covered it over. Late in the evening, I looked up from my camera and found Adrian watching me from across the room. Not the way a chief executive watches an employee. Something different. Something he had not entirely intended me to catch. He looked away. So did I. But the moment existed, and neither of us could pretend otherwise. The dinner that night was the whole team together, a private room, food that deserved the attention people were giving it, wine and noise and the particular warmth of a group of people who are very good at something and have just been very good at it together. I laughed that evening in the way I had almost forgotten I could laugh, freely, from somewhere real. The next morning, Adrian called me to his suite. He was by the window when I arrived, city below him, beginning its morning. He turned when I came in. He crossed to the table, picked up a folder, opened it. Inside was a layout, done overnight by the design team, a magazine cover, my face, the champagne silk dress, my grandmother's earrings, my eyes looking directly into the camera with the calm of someone who has stopped apologizing for taking up space. My name, printed simply in the corner, Isabella, not hidden behind someone else's identity, not reduced to a relationship, just my name occupying the space it was always supposed to occupy. I stared at it. "The commissioning issue runs next month," Adrian said. "I want you on this cover, not because you were at the event, because you are exactly what this magazine looks like when it is working." I was quiet for a long moment. "The woman he called unattractive," I said, almost to myself. Adrian looked at me directly. "He was catastrophically wrong about you," he said, "and I think some part of you always knew it." That evening, flowers arrived at my suite. Lilies and roses, the real ones, filling the room with a scent that felt like home. He had somehow already learned those were the ones I loved, which meant he had been paying attention in the quiet way that people pay attention when they genuinely care. A note came with them, handwritten. "Dinner tonight, 7 o'clock. Wear something that feels like you are no longer just surviving." I read it twice. Then I sat down and took a breath and told myself to be careful with this, because it mattered, and I did not want to be careless with something that mattered. Then I got dressed. He was already at the table when I arrived, which meant he had been waiting. He stood the moment I came through the door. He did not speak for a moment. "You are going to make this evening very difficult," he said. "How?" I asked. "Because I will not be able to pay attention to anything else." We sat. We talked. Not about work. About everything underneath work. What we had wanted when we were young and what remained of it. The photographs we had loved before we understood why we loved them. What it means to actually live a life versus simply occupying the time that passes while you are waiting for something to begin. He was funny, genuinely, unexpectedly funny, with a timing that suggested he had been quietly amused by the world for a very long time and had simply not found the right company to share it with. He said something about the sommelier that made me laugh so hard I had to put my glass down. "You have a wonderful laugh," he said afterward. "You say things," I said. "What does that mean?" "You say what you are actually thinking. Most people do not do that." "Most people are afraid of what they are actually thinking," he said, and held my eyes long enough to make it clear that sentence was not a general observation. After dinner we walked. Paris at that hour is another kind of city, quieter but more present. Lights on the river. The smell of the first bakeries starting their night work. Bridges with that particular worn warmth of stone that has been stood on by centuries of people who had important things to say to each other. We walked close enough that our arms touched and neither of us moved away. He stopped on a bridge. He looked at the water for a moment. Then he turned to me. "I do not know when it happened," he said, quietly. "But somewhere between that pavement in October and this bridge tonight, I stopped seeing you as someone I found broken." He looked at me, "and started seeing you as someone I do not want to lose." Paris was completely quiet around us. "Adrian," I started. He kissed me, soft, unhurried. The kind of kiss that is asking something rather than taking something. That says, "I see you. All of it, everything you have been through, and everything you are becoming, and I am choosing it." I kissed him back. We stood on that bridge for a long time. When we finally walked back, he held my hand with a naturalness that felt like something that had always been true and had simply needed the right evening to become visible. Outside my suite, he stopped. "Stay one more day," he said. I looked at him. "One more day," I said. He smiled. Then more quietly, "And tonight, I just want to be near you, not across a restaurant table, near you." I opened the door. "Come in," I said. He had arranged the suite while I was getting ready for dinner. Fresh lilies and roses everywhere, real ones, their scent settling into every corner of the room. Soft music from somewhere. The balcony doors open onto the Paris night beyond. On the coffee table, a bottle of champagne and ice. And beside it, a small object wrapped in deep blue silk. He saw me looking at it. He picked it up, held it a moment without speaking. "I bought this today," he said. "I know how that sounds. I know exactly how fast this is. But I have spent 12 years moving at precisely the speed the world required of me, and I do not want to do that anymore. Not with this." He unwrapped the silk, a diamond ring, round cut, set simply. When it caught the light from the flowers on the table, it broke it into something extraordinary. He did not kneel. He stood in front of me, close, and held it in the space between us. "I am not asking you to decide your entire future tonight," he said. "I am just showing you what is true for me. And I am asking if you will let me show up for you, properly, with everything I have, for as long as you will allow it." He held my eyes. "Will you let me do that, Isabella?" The room smelled of lilies. The stars above Paris were doing their absolute best. I took the ring from his hand. I put it on my own finger. "Yes," I said. He exhaled as though he had been holding that breath since October. Then he laughed, surprised, real, unguarded in a way I suspected very few people ever saw him. He pulled me close, and I pressed my face against his shoulder, and we stood there in the Paris suite, the city going on outside, the lilies going on all around us, and neither of us needed to say a single word more. We went out to the balcony later, 2 glasses of champagne, the stars crowded and generous above the rooftops. We talked and fell into comfortable silences and talked again. The kind of evening that you know while it is still happening, that you will carry it forever. I fell asleep on his shoulder well past midnight. He did not move for a long time. The engagement leaked the following morning. Somebody in the hotel or the restaurant or simply the city, which has no particular obligation to keep secrets. A photograph appeared. 2 people on a bridge, unclear but unmistakable. Then the balcony. Then Vantage magazine's communications team issued a clean, brief statement, because trying to manage a story that was already in 62 languages was a losing proposition. The world responded loudly and immediately. Adrian handled it with the ease of someone for whom headlines are simply a feature of the landscape. I read the articles about myself and felt, in the place where I had expected anxiety, something I had not felt in years. Presence. I was not hidden. I was not positioned. I was not someone's quiet domestic fact or carefully managed public absence. I was front and center, my own name, my own face, my own story. The Vantage magazine issue ran. The cover photograph, me in the champagne dress, mid-turn in a Paris corridor, laughing at something just off frame, completely forgetting the camera, completely present in the moment. That was what the photograph showed. A woman who had stopped bracing for impact. A woman who had, in the space of less than a year, stopped surviving and started living. 62 countries. airport newsstands, hotel lobbies, dentists' waiting rooms, the hands of people who had never heard my name and would now not forget my face. And at one particular airport newsstand, at 10 minutes to 7 in the morning, a man stopped walking and could not move. Daniel had not been sleeping properly for some time. The company had collapsed in stages, each one worse than the one before. The investors left first, quietly, then loudly. Then the investigations, the kind that appear when people who used to be silent start having reasons to speak. The share price went down and did not come back up. The friends who had populated the good years performed their disappearing act so smoothly, you almost had to admire the coordination. And Monica, for whom he had done all of it. Monica had left him 5 months after I walked out of the house. Her first love, a man who had been abroad for years, came back to the country. She met him at the airport. She did not come home. She sent a message eventually, brief, wishing him well in the tone of someone who has already traveled so far that wishing him well costs nothing. He stood in front of the newsstand. He picked up the Vantage magazine copy. He read my name. He read it again. He read it a third time. The woman he had sat across from on a cream-colored couch and told, calmly and deliberately, that she was unattractive, that he deserved better, that he could not continue pretending. My face, every rack in the terminal, my eyes looking back at him from 62 countries. He set the magazine down carefully. He found a seat by the window. He sat down and he put his hands over his face. He understood now, fully, without any of the defenses or rationalizations that had kept the understanding at a manageable distance for the past year. He had not left a broken woman. He had released an extraordinary one. And the difference between those two things was the entire shape of his current life. He wept. They married 6 months after the engagement. Not a performance, a wedding. 2 people standing in front of the people who loved them, making a promise they meant in every direction. Me in white silk and lilies, Adrian in midnight blue, the photographs taken by Celeste, who said afterward it was the simplest brief of her career. Point the camera at 2 people who are not pretending anything. Vantage magazine ran it on 3 covers simultaneously. 3 months after the wedding, I discovered I was pregnant. The ultrasound showed 3 heartbeats. The room went completely silent for a moment. Then both of us started laughing at exactly the same time. Triplets. 2 boys and a girl. Noah arrived first, with the settled gravity of someone who has already assessed the situation and found it acceptable. From his earliest weeks, he watched everything with the patient attention of a person taking notes. He spoke early and in complete sentences, as though he had been waiting until he had something worth saying. Liam arrived second, and arrived ready. Where Noah was still and observant, Liam was perpetual motion and noise, and the specific kind of charm that gets a person into trouble at approximately the same speed it gets them back out of it. He had his father's dark hair and my laugh, a combination that made effective discipline functionally impossible. Mila arrived last and took charge immediately. She was smaller than both of her brothers and proceeded on the assumption that this was a technicality. By the time she was 18 months old, she had developed a command system delivered through pointed looks and decisive gestures that the entire household responded to with more reliability than most spoken instructions. By the time she could talk, she issued corrections. By the time she was 3, she issued them with citations. The mornings were extraordinary in their chaos. Everyone had opinions about breakfast. The opinions were incompatible. Adrian once sat at the head of the breakfast table during a dispute about the banana situation, and a parallel dispute about whether milk counted as a drink or a food, and Mila's running commentary on both, and looked across at me with the expression of a man who runs a company with 400 employees and has only recently grasped the limits of that preparation. Different skill set, I said, without looking up from my coffee. Completely different, he agreed. Liam, at 3 years old, during a visit to the Vantage magazine offices that was supposed to be brief and civilized, stopped in the lobby, looked down at his father's shoes, and announced at full volume, "Daddy, why do your shoes look like they cost more than my whole life?" Adrian looked down at his shoes. He looked back up at his son. "They are very expensive shoes," he said. "That is wasteful," said Liam, and walked off to investigate a large potted plant in the corner. The lobby receptionist required a moment to collect herself. Noah's contribution came later and more quietly. He found a photograph, an early one from the first weeks, slightly blurry, taken on someone's phone in the guest house. I had kept it without quite deciding to. He brought it to me one Sunday morning with the careful deliberateness of someone returning something valuable. "Is this you?" he said. "Yes," I said. He studied it with his full attention. "You look sad in this one," he said. "I was," I said. He thought about it. "But then you met Daddy." "And then I met Daddy." He nodded once, satisfied that the narrative resolved correctly, and placed the photograph back exactly where he had found it. Mila's contribution to the family record came during a Vantage magazine lifestyle feature shoot. The photographer hired for the day had spent over an hour being defeated by Liam's inability to remain in a single position and Noah's refusal to produce a smile that looked like anything other than a reconstruction of a smile from a description. Mila had watched this from the corner with her arms folded. Then she walked to the spot in the room with the best light, positioned herself in it, looked at the camera, and waited. Her brothers arranged themselves around her. The photographer had the shot in 30 seconds. "She is alarming," Celeste said, watching from the doorway. "She is efficient," I said, with the specific pride of a woman recognizing a quality she had worked very hard to build in herself. Somewhere in a different part of the city, in a smaller apartment than he had once been used to, a man was running out of options. Daniel had tried several things in 4 years since the divorce, and none of them had taken hold. The company was fully gone, the properties sold, the accounts exhausted. The friends had finished their disappearing act. Monica had abandoned him, married her first love, and was living a life that did not include him in any capacity. He had nothing left to protect, which was its own kind of strange clarity. One morning he found himself outside the Vantage magazine building without having consciously decided to go there. He had been walking the way you walk when you have no destination, and his feet had brought him here. He went in. He asked for Isabella. They made him wait, which was correct. A PA came and led him up. I was standing when he entered. We looked at each other, and neither of us spoke for a moment. He looked smaller than I remembered, not in height, in the particular way a person looks when the thing that was keeping them large on the inside has departed. "I lost everything," he said. His voice was steady. That was perhaps the last thing he had managed to keep. Behind me, through the open connecting door, I was aware of movement. Adrian pausing in the doorway, not entering, not interfering, just present, the way he was always present. I looked at Daniel. "You did not lose me," I said. "You released me." I sat at my desk. I opened a drawer. I wrote a check with calm, deliberate strokes and held it out across the desk. He stared at it. When he reached for it, his hands were shaking. "Why?" he said. "Because you were part of my becoming," I said. "Without that morning on that couch, without that suitcase, and that street, and that night, I would not be standing here. You were the instrument, and I forgave you the moment I walked out of that house." He looked at the check. He looked at me. He looked at the woman who had made his coffee every morning for 7 years and ironed his shirts and prayed for him in the dark, and who was now looking at him from behind the desk of the corner office of a company that ran in 62 countries, and the full weight of what he had thrown away landed on him all at once. He went to his knees. "Please stand up," I said, quietly, without coldness. He stood. "Isabella," he said, "I am sorry. I was wrong about you. I was wrong about all of it. I was wrong in ways I could not see until it was too late, and I am telling you now because there is nothing else left to give you except the truth." I looked at him for a long moment. "I know," I said. He turned to Adrian, who had moved to stand just inside the doorway, close enough to be present, far enough to give the room its space. "Take care of her," Daniel said. "You are the lucky one. Please take care of her." Adrian met his eyes. "I know exactly how lucky I am," he said. "And I do." Daniel nodded. He looked at the check. He looked at me one final time. Then he turned and walked out of the office, down the corridor, into the elevator, through the lobby, out the glass doors, into the city, and out of my story. The door closed. I stood at the window. Adrian came to stand beside me. Neither of us spoke. I leaned into his shoulder, and he put his arm around me. We stood together and looked out at the same city it had always been, and from where we stood, entirely different. The children were at school. There was a family dinner tonight. I had a shoot in the morning. I thought about the woman who had walked out of a house with one suitcase in the October cold, with not a single direction that felt right. I would not trade a single step. And here I was, extraordinary. Here I was, enough. I picked up my camera. I went back to work. If this story reached something in you, hold on to this. What they call your ending is almost always your beginning, wearing a disguise. I was not finished. I was not even close. I was just getting started. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Like, comment, subscribe. Because tomorrow's story is even more powerful than this one.